Hi, welcome back to my book club. If you're new here, hi, my name is Hunter. I'm a therapist, and together we're reading Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents by Lindsay Gibson. And today we're reading Chapter 9, How It Feels to Live Free of Roles and Fantasies. If you need caught up on our previous chapters, head over to my YouTube channel. But for today's video, let me know what you think in the comments down below. Let's get started. In this chapter, we'll explore what life feels like when you stop playing a role in order to relate to an emotionally immature parent and regain the emotional freedom to truly be yourself. As you'll learn, it can be a struggle to get free, but it's well worth it. Family patterns that may be holding you back. Let's review some of the family dynamics that keep people trapped in old roles. As a reminder, enmeshed families are a stronghold against the fear of individuality. A child's individuality is seen as a threat to emotionally insecure and immature parents because it stirs up fears about possible rejection or abandonment. These parents feel threatened when their children express genuine emotions because it makes interactions unpredictable. It seems threatening to family ties. Therefore, their children, in an attempt to prevent their parents from becoming anxious, often suppress any authentic thoughts, feelings, or desires that would disturb their parents' sense of security. Denial of individual needs and preferences. Such parents also teach their children to be ashamed of any aspect of themselves that differs from them. In such families, internalizing children often learn to feel ashamed of the following normal behaviors, such as enthusiasm, sadness and grief over hurt, loss, or change, saying what they really feel and think, or expressing anger when they feel wronged or slighted. On the other hand, they are taught that the following experiences and feelings are acceptable or even desirable, such as obedience and deference toward authority, liking the same things as the parent, guilt and shame over imperfections or being perfect, or willingness to listen, especially to the parent's distress and complaints. If you were an internalizing child with an emotionally immature parent, you were taught many self-defeating things about how to get along in life, such as giving first consideration to what other people want you to do. Don't speak up for yourself. Don't ask for help, and don't want anything for yourself. Internalizing children of emotionally immature parents come to see their feelings and needs as unimportant at best and shameful at worst. Next section. Adhering to an internalized parental voice. Through a process Gibson calls parent voice internalization, children absorb their parents' opinions and beliefs in the form of an inner voice that keeps an ongoing commentary. Often this voice says things like, you should, you'd better, or you have to. Although this commentary sounds like your own voice, it's really an echo of your early caretakers. Everyone internalizes their parents' voices. It's how we're socialized. The goal is to recognize the voice as something imported that isn't part of your true self. One way of doing so is to use the maturity awareness approach in Chapter 8. As you get more objective about your emotionally immature parent, you can also reevaluate the voices in your head. You can make a point to observe how these internal voices talk to you and make a rational decision about whether you want to keep listening to that inner critic. Like the title suggests, the rest of the chapter will be about the different freedoms you experience when you break free of your old role and fantasies. The first is the freedom to be human and imperfect. Let's take a look at Jason's story. Jason, a successful college professor and amateur artist, had been depressed for years. He'd grown up with an arrogant, critical father and a self-preoccupied mother, neither of whom had any patience for him. Jason had internalized a very negative, perfectionistic inner parental voice that constantly evaluated him. Fortunately, in the course of therapy, Jason became aware of the connection between this inner voice and his disapproving parents. Once he was able to hear the voice for what it was, Jason realized that he didn't have to believe it when it told him he was being bad, selfish, or lazy. When he felt dread about doing something, instead of forcing himself to do it, Jason paused and asked himself, are my needs part of this picture? He learned to first ask himself what he wanted to do, making choices on his own behalf and beating the inner voice to the punch. By taking a moment to deliberately think about what he really wanted, Jason was at last freeing himself from the tyranny of his inner voice. The next freedom, to have your genuine thoughts and feelings. If your childhood thoughts and feelings made your parents uncomfortable, you would have quickly learned to suppress these inner experiences. You may have learned the idea that you can be a bad person for having certain thoughts and feelings. However, you need access to all your inner experiences without feeling guilty or ashamed of them. A thought or feeling means nothing more than that you're having a thought or feeling. The fact is, having a thought or feeling isn't initially under your control. Accepting the truth of your feelings and thoughts doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you a whole person and mature enough to know your own mind. Freedom to suspend contact. Ideally, you'd probably like to have the freedom to be yourself, yet protect yourself while continuing to relate to your parent. Still, you might find it necessary at times to protect your emotional health by suspending contact for a while. Although this can stir up tremendous guilt and self-doubt, consider the possibility that you may have good reasons for keeping your distance. Some parents are so unreflective that, despite repeated explanations, they simply don't accept that their behavior is problematic. In addition, some sadistic parents truly are malevolent toward their children and enjoy the pain and frustration they cause. Children of these sorts of parents may decide that suspending contact is the best solution. Just because a person is your biological parent doesn't mean you have to keep an emotional or social tie to that person. Just like with Aisha. Aisha, a 27-year-old woman with a successful career in TV reporting, struggled with depression and low self-esteem. Her mother, Ella, had always called Aisha a problem child. Aisha felt she could never please Ella, but she kept trying to make her proud anyway. Ella couldn't resist mocking Aisha in front of other people, including her boyfriends. Although Aisha confronted Ella about these behaviors many times, it never seemed to help. Ella always feigned innocence. Once Aisha decided to break off contact with Ella, her stress levels decreased markedly. She worried that she was a bad person for not seeing her mother, but she couldn't deny how much better she felt and how much more self-esteem she had without Ella in her life. Freedom to set limits and choose how much to give. While suspending contact is sometimes necessary, some people are able to set limits so effectively that their parents simply don't have an opportunity to do more harm. One way to do this is to take control of how frequently you're in contact with your parents. By setting limits on contacts, you can devote more energy to your own needs for self-care. Your parents may protest when you aren't as generous with your time or attention as you used to be. However, these difficult moments present a priceless opportunity to get over any irrational guilt for having needs of your own. Your job is to take care of yourself, regardless of what others think you should be doing for them. Paying attention to subtle energy drains from other people can help you realize when you're giving too much. Gibson recommends using the maturity awareness mindset to observe how your parents react when you ask them to respect your boundaries, such as with Brad. Brad had his hands full with a demanding job, 4 children, and a shaky marriage. Although he was under a lot of stress, he agreed to let his irascible mother, Ruth, move in with his family. Ruth showed no sensitivity to the tension in the house. If she felt snubbed, she would slam doors, yell at the children, and swear at the pets. Brad felt like he was nearing a breakdown. Brad saw that he had to choose between his health and his mother's sense of entitlement. Brad finally asked Ruth to move into a rental house they owned on the other side of town. Brad was tactful but remained firm, describing how he didn't let himself get needled. He kept his focus on the outcome he wanted from the talk, for Ruth to move out. Brad had finally realized how much stress Ruth was adding to an already difficult living situation, saying, I used to tell myself to make it work, but the fact is I don't want to make it work with her. I have the energy, but it's not what I want to do. Freedom to have self-compassion. In order to take care of yourself, you need to feel compassion for yourself. Extending compassion to yourself can be so healing, yet it can also feel quite unnatural at first. One woman described it this way: it's an odd feeling, sad, intense, relieving, so many things at once. Now I have empathy for how painful and exhausting my childhood was. Grief and tears are a normal response to the dawning of self-compassion, arising as we come to grips with painful truths that are hard to take in. If you've spent many years not being validated, you've probably suppressed sadness more than any other emotion. Being conscious of our emotions, including grief, is how we do the inner work of psychological growth. Regaining the ability to feel for yourself comes in waves, and some of these waves can be very intense. Having a lot of unprocessed emotion to integrate can feel overwhelming. Your body knows how to cry and grieve. If you let your feelings arise and keep trying to understand them, you'll come out of the experience a more integrated, mature person with a greater compassion for yourself and others. In that same vein, freedom from excessive empathy. Internalizers are so emotionally sensitive that they can go overboard in feeling empathy for other people's problems. With healthy empathy, you can have compassion without losing awareness of your own limits, such as with Rebecca. Rebecca's elderly mother, Irene, was an externalizer who complained constantly. Nothing was ever right, even though Rebecca had tried her hardest to make her happy. One day in session, Rebecca revealed a fundamental error in her thinking when she commented, "But there's nothing wrong with wanting her to feel better." "Yes, there is," Gibson found herself exclaiming. This belief was at the heart of Rebecca's self-sacrificing role with her mother. Being invested in Irene feeling better was a serious problem because it fueled Rebecca's emotional enmeshment with her mom. She was working towards something Irene didn't want. After a very frustrating day spent unsuccessfully trying to help her, Irene looked at Rebecca and said, "Just keep coming to see me." Rebecca was flabbergasted. After all she had tried to do to make her mother happy, was this all she really wanted? She finally saw that Irene would never be happy, but that this didn't have to be a problem for either of them. Freedom to take action on your own behalf. Before we get into the next section, this made me think of our previous chapter with internalizers and externalizers. How externalizers could find more balance if they were a little more insightful, and how internalizers could find more balance if they were a little more action-oriented. Gibson goes on to say, growing up with emotionally immature parents may have caused you to feel helpless, both as a child and as an adult. It's important to realize that childhood experiences of profound helplessness can feel traumatic, feeling like victims with no control. Even if this victim reaction is deeply ingrained, you can always reclaim your right to ask for help, and even more importantly, to keep on asking for help as often as necessary. Action on your own behalf is the antidote to traumatic feelings of helplessness. Let's take a look at Carissa's story. After finally seeing how her dominating father Bob had trained her to feel helpless, Carissa worked toward outcomes she wanted. One time, as her family gathered on the deck for drinks, everyone took their seats in such a way that Bob was about to end up at one side of the deck, a perfect setup to lecture to a captive audience. Carissa saw it happening and took action. She later told Gibson, "In the past, I would have thought, oh, I'm screwed. Now I'm stuck. But this time I took charge." She slid her chair next to her dad to prevent him from becoming the center of attention, and it worked. Using the maturity awareness approach, Carissa had managed the interaction to achieve the outcome she wanted: equal participation. Freedom to express yourself. Expressing yourself with emotionally immature people is an important act of self-affirmation. Remember, an important step in the maturity awareness approach is expressing yourself and then letting it go. It's important to relinquish the belief that if your parents loved you, they'd understand you. As an independent adult, you can function without their understanding. You can speak up politely when you feel like it and be different without offering excuses. By expressing yourself to your parents in this way, you can be authentic even in the absence of their understanding. The point of expressing your feelings is to be true to yourself, not to change your parents. Holly's story. Holly's father, Mel, was a barber who lived in a small southern town. Holly had always longed for her father's recognition of her accomplishments, but when she brought up her job or other high points in her life, Mel seemed to have no idea how to respond to her. When Holly was going through difficulties in her job, she called Mel for moral support. But when she was in the middle of telling him what a tough time she was having, he suddenly changed the subject. Holly was prepared to handle the situation differently by using clear, intimate communication. Dad, she exclaimed, I'm going to talk about me some more. I'm going through a really hard time. I need to talk to you. By speaking up, Holly made her needs clear and finally felt heard by her father. The next section, freedom to approach old relationships in new ways. Like Carissa and Holly, you can interact with your parents in new ways that shake up old patterns and keep the focus on the outcome you're seeking. You aren't denying your past, you're just accepting your parents as they are, without expectations. Sometimes parents will respond to this kind of honesty and neutrality by relating in a more emotionally genuine way. As you stop trying to win their attention, the emotional intensity ebbs to a point where they sometimes can tolerate more openness. By giving up your healing fantasy about changing your parents, you let them be who they are. When they're no longer under pressure to change, they may be able to treat you differently or not. Your job is to be okay either way. Freedom to not want anything from your parent. The most painful interactions with emotionally immature parents occur when their children need something from them. Many self-involved parents like it when their child is needy and they can be the center of the child's longing. Witnessing their child's dependency makes them feel secure and in control. The idea of stepping back and asking yourself whether you really need your parents or whether they need you to need them might seem radical. Consider whether your need for them is real or whether it might be a holdover from unmet childhood needs. The question is relevant to relating to any emotionally immature person, whether spouse, friend, or relative. You can get swept up into believing that you're desperate for a relationship with someone, even when you actually don't enjoy the interactions the other person has to offer. The summary. This chapter explored how it feels to break free from roles and expectations designed to please emotionally immature parents. Although you may have learned to reject yourself, you can claim the freedom to express yourself and take action on your own behalf. You are free to extend compassion to yourself and even grieve what you've lost as a result of having emotionally immature parents. Your first job is your own self-care, including setting limits on how much you give, even to the point of suspending contact with your parents if necessary. You no longer have to exhaust yourself with excessive empathy for other people. And as you shed your old family role, you can relate to your parents more honestly without needing them to change. My takeaway from this chapter was this. I appreciate the emphasis on freedom, from suspending contact to changing the relationship altogether. I think there's a tough part though. Freedom can feel alone. Having a support system slash building your new life before going off on your own would be important to not feel so alone. Chapter 10 is the last chapter, so I wanted to read what Gibson has before we get into it next week. In the next chapter, we'll take a look at how you can use the maturity awareness approach to find more emotionally mature friends and partners. Gibson will also offer some pointers on developing new attitudes and values that will promote the possibility of more rewarding and reciprocal relationships in the future. Thank you so much for reading this chapter with me. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and make sure to like this video and subscribe if you learned something. And tune in next week when we go through our last chapter, chapter 10, How to Identify Emotionally Mature People. I'll see you next week.